To start, I would like to briefly mention some of the reasons why we think it's important to monitor funding. So obviously, yes, the policy design, and we want to assess evaluate how successful we are with our policies, rural policies, and are the measures reaching the beneficiaries? Can we do something better? So how to make the policies, how to design them, how to assess them, and how to improve them. But also, of course, we are accountable for the public funding. So we want also to show how this funding is supporting, this funding that is targeting rural areas is really supporting the rural areas. We want to ensure transparency, and that's also making sure that the stakeholders, also at the local level, know how much funding is going to reach them and what opportunities they can to use it. And also, without that information, it's very difficult to get the stakeholders involved. When the stakeholders know that there is some support going to reach them or is already reaching them, they feel much more involved and much more willing to contribute and to become active. And also, they come up with project ideas if they know that they can get them funded. So that's why there are all kinds of reasons, and I'm sure there are others that we haven't thought of, why this question of monitoring the funding is important. We are going to have a very quick plenary session where we will have the view of an expert who has done the study on rural funding, and then contributions from 3 European Commission DGs. And then we will have working groups, which I will just briefly show you that it's happening, but I will stop there. I will go back to the process of the working groups at the end of the session. So now I would like to ask our honored colleague Francesco Mantino from CREA in Italy, who has been participating in this study on rural funding, to help us, to guide us through his outcomes.
Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here in this rural family. I see many friends working on rural issue since many years. My presentation starts from this study that we have conducted for the European Commission, for DG AGRI. The objectives of this study were to understand what kind of approaches to rural areas has been introduced in member states, and what kind of funds allocations has been concretely implemented in the last programming period among the different territories. So we try to distinguish in terms of rural approach 3 kinds of approaches. An holistic approach that is fundamentally based on the selection of specific rural areas and based on dedicated funds for these rural areas. A second approach was a strong political commitment for rural areas, where there are a framework that coordinate all the intervention for rural areas without any strong instrument of controlling the implementation of the different policies in rural areas, and a third approach where there is not a real focus on rural areas, but there is no territorial priority. In terms of funds allocation, we try to understand what kind of distribution of funds in terms of main measures allocated to rural areas. And in this bar chart, if you look at the last bar, you see that for the intermediate and rural areas, the definition of rural and intermediate areas was based on the Eurostat definition. Most of the funds come from the first pillar, and the importance of first pillar is emphasized in this particular territorial context. If we consider all the policies interesting rural areas, involved in rural areas, excluding the first pillar, there is a sort of more balanced distribution between the different funds, but the FADI, the Rural Development Fund, has a strong role for rural intermediate areas. What are the most relevant lessons drawn by this study? The first lesson is that we need a definition of rural areas that allow us to understand the fund allocation, and the definitions that we have are very large, so we need a more refined definition of rural areas. Especially, this is the second lesson, the attention should be focused on the most remote and constrained rural areas, because these could give us the ideas and the right measure of the importance of the allocation in the most fragile areas. And third, we need to overcome the unit of analysis, that is NUTS3, because NUTS3 is a reference unit that is completely insufficient to understand the distribution over the territory, the European territory of the funds. Starting from this study, the first reflection is on what information do we need and at which territorial unit. As I said, NUTS3 is greatly insufficient because there is a strong heterogeneity between countries and within the same countries in the definition of NUTS3. NUTS3 is too large to understand the real allocation to rural areas. So we need to collect information at the law level, at least. And law level, in our opinion, should be the minimum common territorial unit to collect information on the funds allocation. And this information available at law level would allow to make different type of comparison. Independently from the definition we use, we could aggregate the information on the public expenditure in a way that is coherent with our definition. Evidently, there are problems of comparability between funds, because there are funds like, for example, the regional funds that has no territorial targets, and the scope of most of the intervention is larger than the law level. But more in detail, we need information on the single project at the level of single beneficiary. And the list of information that we need is represented in this slide. Starting from the type of beneficiary, the demographic characteristics in case of intervention for enterprises, the structural characteristics. We should know what type of activities, economic activities are supported. And crucial is the information on the localization of the supported beneficiary. And also other information related to the public support, EU, national, and the different stages of the support. If it's planned, is committed, is paid, because there are strong differences between these different stages. And the typologies also of support, because the typologies of support is different from the different funds. And so we need to have a sort of classification of these typologies. And finally, the process of delivery. But it is important to understand the implementation phase, the type of call, the date of implementation phase. These are all information that we will need to make an analysis of public expenditure. Is it a dream? I don't think so, because in some case we have already this information. Because, for example, paying agencies for the rural development, for the CAP, first pillar, have in their database this information. The problem raised for the, obviously for the RDF and SDF. What are the implications for the agenda? In my view, the implication, first implication is we should use the information we have already in our databases at the national and at the European level, because this information is not used in the most efficient way. And also for regional development fund and for social fund, there are information in the single countries at the national level, and surely should be explored much more than we have done until now. Second implication, we have to revise the minimum territorial unit to gather the information from the beneficiary. Probably we should move from the NAS3 to LAO level, and probably we need also to have some adjustment for some fund. And the third implication is that we should use the spending data to compare different territorial allocation. But if we have very detailed information at the granular level for spending data, we can aggregate according to different definition of rural areas, according to the GURBA classification, that is the official one, according to CAP strategic plan definition, there are different definitions in different countries. According also to OECD definition, we can use different definition. It depends on the basic information that we have. And last point is that probably we need an action, a strong action of promotion of an higher coordination among funds in data gathering and provision. Even if each fund has its own specificities, this doesn't matter, but we should try to find some coordination in gathering data. And according to this study, we found that, for example, there are difficulties in comparing the CAP data with European regional fund and social funds, because for social and regional fund we have eligibility investments. We have no data at the European level on expenditure, so we had to estimate through the rate of co-financing the real expenditure of these funds. And also in the work of refinement of this data was long, because most of the data have no specification on the location, on the type of the code of the location. So we had several technical problems that after 30 years of structural funds should not be found, in my view. Some example of the, I went further in this analysis, and I can show you some example of analysis of expenditure at the different level. For example, using the Gurba classification, we can have the amount of funds, the EU funds, in cities, town and village, and rural areas, the total fund. When I saw this figure, I was shocked, because for two reasons. This is related to the Italian expenditure, not to European. Because for two reasons. Because the first is you can see the gap between the expenditure in the cities and in rural areas. It is striking. And second, because these are most of the funds spent in Italy for structural investments. There are no other relevant policies for rural areas. So we can imagine that what is the difference between the different territories in our cases. And we can explain in this way the discontent of people that receive this amount of funds. We cannot be surprised after this. And this bar chart illustrates also the composition of the funds in the different situation, the different De Gurba classification. In cities were characterized by the prevalence of regional funds and social funds, obviously, but rural areas, the role of European Rural Development Fund is relevant. And finally, another possible use of this analysis is the composition of investment according to different situations. In the first three pie charts represent the allocation of money in fragile rural areas according to definition based on demographic variable. The second level is the composition of investments in resilient and vital rural areas. You can see that the composition is completely different, because, for example, in fragile rural areas, the rural development is focused on small-scale infrastructures and non-productive investments, and regional fund is focused on environment and energy. And it's striking the low commitment of regional fund for example, transport and mobility. That should be one of the most important needs of this type of areas. So this is a sort of rural proofing, if you think about this, because if we don't know this kind of picture, it's impossible to understand what kind of amount of the volume of investments in rural areas, and B, the composition of investment, that are very important issue to understand what is happening in our rural areas and in the different rural areas, whatever the definition that we use of rural areas, okay? And the same exercise could be done having this availability of data at the low level with the leader. We can understand the importance of the different funds for the leader approach, and more or less the same situation can be seen in leader allocation, where, for example, in this case, the comparison is between leader areas and non-leader areas, so it could be interesting to understand the difference between the allocation where the leader is present and where there is no leader experience, because also to understand the difference, the value added of leader in our rural areas. So these are examples that could be interesting for us to explore what kind of demand of policies is emerging from the different areas and how we are responding to this demand of policies. And this is crucial to make amendments for the policies. Without this, I don't think we can say that we are improving our rural policies in the different countries. With this, I completed my presentation. I hope that this could stimulate a debate on the monitoring of
Yes, thank you very much. It was excellent. Thank you. It was a really excellent introduction to the topic. Thank you very much, Franco. And it's really, it's only with my heart breaking that I have to stop you here, but we still have 3 more presentations for this opening session, opening of this topic, from the 3 Directorates General. Just to say that the study that Franco was talking about in the beginning, not the Italian one, but the European one, there is a link to this study from the event website. So you can access it, and of course there will be more information for the report of the event. Now, 3 Directorates General agreed to share with us the way they collect data about funding going to rural areas, of course starting with DG AGRI. So we have Sophie, Helaine with us, who's going to describe to us the AGRI system.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. And I feel very well because I feel that we are very good pupil after the presentation we saw, because we will get data at LAU level, so for the CAP. But okay, let's start with what we have currently, and what we will have soon will come later in the presentation. So what do we have? We already have CAP, so data on the Common Agricultural Policy for the former programming period available at NUT 3 level. And this is very widely used in analysis. What we don't have is a definition of functional rural areas, which implies that all our contractors, when they do evaluation, they have to recreate their own definition which fit to the policy needs. Because it's not that we don't have any definition, but we don't have a definition that really fits our policy needs. And it's, by the way, one of the lessons learned of the evaluation that we carried out on the impact of the CAP on territorial development. And the other thing is that evaluating is not only about having the right information at the right level of granularity on funding, but also all the other socioeconomic statistics that you need to relate to look at the impact of your policy. And here also, we don't have all socioeconomic variables, even at NUTS 3 levels, they're not all available. So some are available at NUTS 2, others at NUTS 3, and it's very rare that we have socioeconomic information at a municipality level. Very different when we go to geophysical aspects like soil and so on that we are using, of course, extensively when we assess the CAP. And the fact that we have different level of granularity of this data, unfortunately, is what determines the analysis we are doing. So it's not that we are doing the analysis according to what we think we should look at, but first, the availability of data determines how we analyze. So if only data is available at NUTS 2, it means that we would use the type of rural area as an entry point for characterizing rural areas. If we manage to go to NUTS 3, then other clustering can be done, but it's not entirely satisfactory. Still, I wanted to show you what we managed to demonstrate already. For example, and you demonstrated already earlier that EAGF is very important for rural areas. And here it's a redistribution of the income support, so basically EAGF, between regions as a result of the convergence of the CAP support, meaning that progressively the level of income support is increasing in those member states where it used to be lower, and it's decreasing in those where it used to be the highest per hectare. And that's the external convergence. And at the same time, within member states, where we had differences between regions, between farmers, there is a phenomenon of internal convergence, so that there is more towards a similar level of income support per hectare between farmers. And here you see basically over the period 2015-2019, in blue, the regions at NUTS 3 level which have gained support over the ones which are more in dark orange who have lost support. The other thing which we can do already with the data we have at NUTS 3 level is the spatial distribution of funding, and you have on this side, the multi-dimensional rurality clusters. So it's a study which was done by the GRC. So as I was telling you, each time, basically researchers, contractors developed their own clustering, and they did a clustering of the regions according to their dynamic in terms of socioeconomic development. And in parallel, they looked at how they could mix the CAP support. So, mixing EAGF and EFRD, because that's very important, and looking at how the red, in the red regions are those where Pillar 2, so rural development, is the most, EFRD, is the most important in the gross value added of the NUTS 3 regions. And the yellow, it's where the balance goes towards more rural EAGF income support into the gross value added of agriculture in the regions. And you can see that already with your eyes, you can see that there is a strong correlation between the kind of support and the state of development of the regions. And going further, and using this approach, the GRC could demonstrate with counterfactual analysis that direct payments perform very well in the agri-food sector, rural development in the local economy, so it's a bit broader, the concept, and most of all, that it's really all CAP support which contribute to save jobs in agriculture and rural areas. So again, the importance of direct payments is very clear in the local development of rural areas. And especially direct payments. The other interesting aspect was about the fact that direct payments and market measures. So the market measures are often under sight, that many people know income support or know rural development, but we also have support to wine, apiculture, and the fruit and vegetable sector. And the support goes through operational programs operated by producer organizations for fruit and veg. And it was really demonstrated in this counterfactual analysis that it's very good in terms of gross value added in agriculture. Why? It's also because this kind of support goes to processors, so it's a bit broader than only the primary production. And the study could also demonstrate that rural development support has a very strong effect on the total gross value added of the different regions, thanks also to the spillover effects of the support to the rural, to the farmers and other beneficiaries of rural development. So that's what we managed to do so far. And when we thought about the new CAP and the new programming period, we had 2 years of transition. So for us, the new CAP started to be implemented only in 2023. And that's why we don't have yet full data on what happened on the ground. So the first data we will receive will be next year in February, aggregated level. And I will talk about more disaggregated data that will come later. So whenever we could, already from the start in our performance framework, for the context indicators, we tried to make sure that whenever the two definitions were present, the type of region or the degree of urbanization, we added them systematically in our system of indicators so that it's under the radar. So that... but the point is that it's very rare that both are available. It's sometimes one or the other, but not both. The other aspect was that we let member states target, according to their own definition, their rural action. So, and we let them to define a different population for leader than for the other rural action. So we let really this flexibility for really targeting their action. Then, and this is what I think will interest you most, we are collecting, actually we asked member states to share with us, which is a bit different because it's about data sharing. This is data which is indeed already collected to operate the CAP by the paying agencies. And we asked to share this information on CAP applications by intervention and by beneficiary, meaning that for each of the beneficiaries, we have the payment claim with all the different interventions paid. This data is available at municipality level. So, and it's not covering leader, because for leader, we have another specific request where we have all the municipalities covered by the leader action and more details on the projects. You were also asking to have more information on the projects. This is in this other data request. You were asking also to have characterization of the beneficiaries. So for leader, it's more that we have the gender on the executive members of the board, or the members of the executive board, if I put the words in the right order. And for the rest of the CAP, the characteristics of the beneficiaries, we managed to get them only basically for farmers. Because member states didn't want to share on the other aspects. Why? Because we are asking, again, for the gender, the age, we are asking for the location and with other aspects. And this is very difficult to find out what is the gender of a legal entity. So if you think about a business, and that's why we started by this information on farmers, although there are many legal entities. And what is very interesting is that in terms of location, we are really looking at the place of the production and not the residence of the beneficiary, which is often the case, and this is not of interest to us because we want to know where the action is taking place, not where the owner of the farm has his family house. So that's very good news, I think, for the future. This data will not be available to everybody at municipality level because you know that we have strong data protection requirements, and we will be able to share with our contractors, but not with the researchers. So after raising expectations, bam, I put them down. But okay, we are working on it. It's all questions of GDPR and legal basis. And the other aspect is that we will nevertheless share the data disseminated by NUTS 2. Potentially NUTS 3, we need to be careful because of the possibility to recognize information when there are too many farmers at NUTS 3 level. So we are discussing on how we would, and if we would disseminate publicly the NUTS 3. So yeah, I wanted, I think, to finish here. You have in annexes more references if you want also the legal basis and so on, so that you can go and look by yourself. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Great. Many thanks, Sophie. Indeed, it was very useful. And I think just to remind everybody, we normally put up all the presentations up on our website very soon after the event, and you'll be able to access all those presentations and the annexes and look up the additional information. So many thanks. Okay, so the second DG to present is DG Employment, and we have with us Mathilde Prilleux, and please.
Hi. All right. So after the hello everybody, I work for the ESF Plus team in DG Employment, and after the presentation of the good student, with regard to your topic, here comes the more bad student, I would say. So among the assistants here, many of you work already with the ESF Plus, or by raise of hands. Okay, so yeah, a bit of aficionados. Okay, so the ESF Plus. Just for a quick recall for the rest of the crowd, so the European Social Fund Plus is the main tool for investments in people in the EU. So we have a framework of 3 strands, mostly shared management, but also indirect and direct management for social innovation. But this part I won't talk so much about because we really not follow a lot on rural areas, I would say. So when it comes to the shared management strand, according to our common provision regulation, most of the follow-up on the level of investments is really NUTS 2. And I would say we look more in our investments from a needs and typology of targets point of view than territorial aspects. So the 3 main priorities of the ESF Plus are to invest in employment, the second in social inclusion, and then skills and training, which represent more or less each a third of the ESF Plus investments, for plus 5.3 billion for material deprivation. And it's true that the logic of investments is really, okay, this is the type of needs that we need to target, I don't know, developing social services, addressing child poverty, and yeah, it's without real regard for when we look at the data then for the territorial aspect. Nevertheless, obviously, we have many operations that are run in rural areas, whether it's helping elderly people living in rural context, or investing in skills in the very, very upper Sweden for the transition, or I don't know. I mean, you can see in our website many examples of projects from the rural areas, and there will be the link in the PowerPoint. So mainly when it comes to looking into our program software and seeing where we have main investments in rural areas, we actually use a lot the territorial mechanism, the delivery mechanism. So this is the main source, I would say, in the programs to really track territorial investments in rural areas, and in the end it doesn't really reflect the reality of ESF Plus for rural areas. So these territorial delivery mechanisms, we have them in the CPR defined in our common provision regulation, and the idea is that when writing their programs, the member states must include a table referring to the type of territorial delivery mechanism they choose. That is to say, if they decided to specifically invest in one of the territorial targets that are, so you have some urban ones and also rural. So like you can define rural areas, mountainous areas, island, coastal areas, etc., etc. And the truth, when we look at the data, really, among the 86 billion euros of EU ESF Plus that are tracked through this territorial delivery, that can actually enter a territorial delivery mechanism, because we also have some priorities and some investment priorities that do not require the member states to report on that. So that already puts aside a part of the tracking of the data. Well, we only have 6 billion actually that are registered under that. So it's so it's very thin, and it doesn't bring a lot in terms of what we can analyze or suggest. Nevertheless, we try to promote. Of course, we try to promote the use of beyond the classic use of ESF Plus in rural areas. We try to promote it through especially LEADER, even if, again, we're more of a bad student compared to the other funds, and it's not the most fund, the most used fund for under LEADER, but we still have some projects where ESF Plus is in the lead or working in partnerships. And yeah, I mean, it's decreasing now under the 21-27 programmation, because we had a lot of feedbacks on the administrative complexity that this approach brings. But we have some newcomers that took an interest in it, so we hope that for the future of cohesion policy we can promote this approach. And yeah, that's it. So I mean, happy to develop a bit more in the discussions, of course, on what we could do. But one of the main priorities, I must say, for us currently, given the amount of administrative burden that some of our procedures already bring, in terms of justifying of social situations of our main beneficiaries, it is true that the tracking of the rural aspects is less of a priority, I would say. But of course, happy to have a contradictory discussion.
Okay, many thanks.
Do you need me to take this?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I'll give you a hand. Okay, great. And thanks a lot. And I think, yes, you've already seen also from Franco's presentation the challenges of tracing, the different funds. So of course we cannot expect miracles, but I know everybody's thinking how to make it better in the next period. I think the lesson that we're going to hear now from DG MARE is perhaps going to be inspiring, because maybe even though DG MARE is not necessarily collecting data about rural support, but they have developed a very interesting system of tracking individual projects, which can help maybe and be inspiring. So we have Eoin McCabe from DG MARE, who's going to share with us the experience.
Thank you very much, Ursula. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eoin. I'm from DG MARE. I'm going to be talking about the European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund. We deal, obviously, with coastal and rural areas, because we have in our landlocked member states, we have aquaculture. Well, we have aquaculture everywhere, but specifically there we have often very rural areas. Is this my pointer? Yes. Yeah. Thank you. So I just want to put into context a little bit the MFAF, how it's different to the others. Our last speaker was referring to the CLLD component, which was 6.4 billion and was very small amount of money. For the entire fund here, we have 6.1 billion. It's spread very, very widely. The speaker before that was speaking about NUTS regions and showing very nice illustrations on the screen, but really 6.1 billion spread over an entire region like that. It's very, very difficult to capture results at NUTS 3 or NUTS 2. So I want to speak a little bit about how much detail we go to. and how we alleviate differences between member states when they report. And always we're trying to do it by reducing administrative burden as much as possible. In the previous fund, for example, we had an annual implementation report where we would get a narrative. Now that is cut out, and we really report on the fund only by using the statistics that the member states provide. So it's important that they select indicators and select targets that suit what they want to achieve from their program, that we get meaningful information at the end. A very important aspect behind that is the monitoring framework that we've had developed over the last 3 funding periods. Initially, it was difficult to put it in place. We supported the member states for that. We've had a dedicated support unit to help the member states, and we've evolved with them and in close collaboration with the member states, expertise that has been gained there. So just to put it into perspective, our President von der Leyen has been saying, really the main message I think coming from her is that she wants to get money easier to the citizens, but to justify that we continue that support, of course we need to be able to report on it. We need to say what it's been used for and show this is bringing value for money, and then we continue that support. So that's why it's important for us that we capture data at the operation level, and that's essentially the difference. The MFAF captures data at the operation level. I said it's simplified based on what we did in the past period. Member states submit to us twice per year. We get information on each operation that they're implementing in the member state, what stage it's at, whether it's just been selected, if it's in process, or if it's been completed. As I said, we have a support unit that really help the member states in designing their indicators, setting their targets, understanding how to report, and so that we get useful data at the end. And a very important thing that they also do is they manage a validation tool. So when the member states submit their data, we already automatically identify, are there values in here that simply don't make sense? Is there an extra 0 or is the comma in the wrong place? So we have very clean data that we can then work with. The Maritime Fund is part of the Common Provisions Regulation with a number of other regulations, and for that we have to report also at a higher level of aggregation. So taking the operational level data, we also have an aggregation tool that automates that so that we can submit it at CPR level, the Common Provisions Regulation. And then we can query that data according to many different criteria. I'll give you some examples in a few minutes. Number of selected operations, total costs, etc. Here, I just want to give, it's not necessary to understand the slide, but I just want to call out a few of the things that we collect at operation level. And you'll see that they're really not that different. It's the standard information that you would collect on any beneficiary who is receiving funding. The difference is that we do it in a structured way. We establish that structure of how to collect the beneficiary level data or operation level data, and that's what the member states send us, rather than member states collecting the operation level data in their own way and then having to aggregate it and put it in a format that's common to member states and submit that. We really start a level back. So information that we collect, of course, we collect NUTS code because that's important at a certain level when you need to aggregate the data. The type of beneficiary, is it a business? Is it processing? Is it aquaculture? Is it a research project, for example? Is it an environmental project, like for protecting Natura 2000 areas or something like that? Is it gender relevant? For example, is it about making space for women on vessels? Is it supporting women in the fisheries and aquaculture sector? How many people are involved so that we can then later identify how many people are benefiting? The number of partners in the project, is it marine, inland, or both? The state of the progress of the operation, is it selected or is it just starting or is it finished? The CFR number there, that means the vessel number. So we have many operations that are linked to vessels, and we want to know what vessels received support, how big are they, and what kind of fishing they engage in. We also have I have down the bottom, type of intervention and type of operation, there are things that are predefined in the regulation, and that allows us to filter by these kind of things so that we can identify what operations are relevant to which type of operations. We have 22 common result indicators. Before we used to have, I don't know, 40 or something like that, but we cut them way, way down. We spent a lot of effort to only identify result indicators that would really capture what the fund is trying to do. And we don't have member state specific indicators or any, it's really honed in on those 22 common result indicators, and you must associate one of those indicators with each operation. And that's what allows us to get this rich level of data. So just for an example, we can identify number of operations and value of investments in aquaculture, SME beneficiaries, are they in remote areas, how many jobs did they create, and we can filter by the investment cost and what the return on that investment was. Did they add the, say, production capacity to the farm to generate more fish, or did they add value to the product, or so on? There are many, many different combinations for what we can do. So to sum up, we have powerful harmonized data at an early stage at the operation level. We don't go for the harmonization at a later stage. It's really the first time the data is entered. That's what we focused on harmonizing. We have clean data because we validate it before the member state submits it, and then we help them aggregate it for the higher level submissions. And so it's a minimum burden for the member states. We've been doing this for more than 15 years and simplifying it all the way, and curation of the data, working with the member states with our dedicated support unit has really paid off in that sense, and we have very valuable data for that. So if you'd like to hear more, please contact us and I'd be happy to discuss with you. Thanks.